Hello and welcome to the FDT-TV podcast. My name is Ian and I am joined, as always, by the lovely Mr. Michael Hawes, who is still chasing that dream of a Premier League title. It's unlikely, but it's not. It's not undoable. It's still not undoable. And there is a new hammer in the world because I've had a baby. Well, I have had a
Yeah.
baby. My wife's had a baby vicariously through me. If it wasn't because of me, we wouldn't have had a baby, would he? Come on. But Mike, how is your week of football been?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. It was obviously there's as you mentioned the title dreams are still possible. Obviously it's very much dependent on the results, and I thought that Fulham were going to do us a favour during the week. In fact, no, it was yourself that
Yeah.
played midweek. It was Fulham just before that, and yeah, I mean for the majority part of certainly the first half, I think you guys were doing all right against them, but true to form, you let me down, Ian. You let me down. I'm not happy, but no, in all seriousness, we are very much now dependent on Manchester City slipping up. Could it be possible? Absolutely. It's been a funny old season, as we've said so many times already this year. But on the flip side of that, we're keeping to our side of the bargain in what was I've got to say was a feisty old game yesterday up at St James's Park. So we'll get on to more of that in a bit. But yeah, not too bad. The hope is still there. The hope is still there.
And I mean, on the other side of that coin is West Ham. Both, if you don't know, we're coming towards the end of the season. We talk about everything Premier League, sometimes other sports, sometimes other leagues. But so I'm an avid West Ham fan. Mike is an avid Arsenal fan. So we do have a little recap every week on that. And for West Ham, we are pretty much safe. It's not mathematical yet, but I think it's very unlikely that we're going to go down. 37 points usually wouldn't be enough to save you, but this season some of the teams have been real dog shit. So 37 points I think is enough to keep us safe. And that and the fact we've got a much better goal difference against the teams around us. Um, so yeah, it's looking done after a very strange performance from David De Gea. Unlikely that we was going to win that, and I think if you are fair, we did get done by VAR. But uh, Manchester United, I think, were the better team on the most part. But you need a little rub of the green every now and again. We got that, and we got the 3 points, so everyone's happy. That being said, the most informed team in the league at the moment, Mike, Liverpool. They've won their last six. They've scored the most goals, conceded the fewest in the last six games. They're only now a point behind Manchester United, although Manchester United have a game in hand. Do you think it's possible for Liverpool to push into that top four, even though their season to start off with was laughable and we thought they were going to be languishing with Chelsea down at the bottom half?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite frank with you, I was looking at the table. It was either yesterday or today, and yeah, it was quite quite a shocking read. I know Liverpool have strung a few results together recently. I didn't realise it was that many, but yeah, it's. I know Manchester United. I think it must have been yesterday. And the reason I say that because at that point they had two games in hand over Liverpool. So with the performance they put in yesterday, and with the absolutely amazing display as you mentioned from David De Gea, yes, there's every likelihood that Liverpool could pip him to full spot. And it's funny because I was listening to. A few kind of like podcasts and stuff where they were talking about the performances of Manchester United, and obviously if they secure top four and win the Carabao Cup, that would be considered a successful season. Obviously, Ten Hag's first season in the Premier League, so you would have to say that is an okay season. But if they miss out on top four, um, again, you would say it was a successful season because there's some silverware behind that. But you've got to
Yeah.
say that from a team that was sitting third quite comfortably, and Gary Neville coming out and saying that they were going to push Manchester City for the remainder of the season. Arsenal were going to drop away. You've got to say it is a bit of a shambles, especially if they do get out of the top four.
Yeah, and I mean they could do the domestic treble, or not treble, domestic double with the FA Cup. Still, they're still in that. But it is one of those things that coming out of the World Cup, they were the informed team. Marcus Rashford was unbeatable, and all of a sudden, I think Casemiro was out for 1 or 2 games. They dropped off a cliff, and they've never really got back to that same lofty heights, I suppose, of performance. But I mean, Dean Henderson went out on loan to Nottingham Forest this season. He could have stayed, but he didn't want to. He was a bit fed up with being lied to under the previous temporary manager. He's been injured for Nottingham Forest for some time. But do you think that we're going to see someone new in goal, whether that be Dean Henderson next year, or whether that be a new signing being brought in because of De Gea's just lapse in form? He's going down the Hugo Lloris route.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, absolutely. It was very interesting because they asked Ten Hag that question yesterday about do you go for a different keeper and stuff. And again, from listening to some of the punditry, certainly after the game, they were saying that if Manchester United are wanting to compete, they need to get a new keeper. And you go back, or cast your mind back a few seasons ago, this is one of the keepers that was like the best in the league, was touted for other clubs around Europe. Would he stay at Manchester United? And they managed to obviously keep him. But he's been an absolute train wreck over the last 2 seasons, I would say. Has cost... I think there was a statistic come up yesterday to say that the most errors which leads to a goal has been De Gea. This season, I think it was like 8 goals that have been through to it was either 8 or 6. A shocking figure when you look at him as one of the best paid keepers in the league. I think some people, some of the commentary I heard yesterday, and certainly from watching the game, that he was should have done better for the goal that you scored. It was a really poor attempt where the goal was chalked off for Antonio. Again, that was such a soft decision that went against you guys, and I really did feel for you, because we've had various conversations, certainly on this podcast, that if you need to, you say it much better, because obviously you, being a previous goalkeeper yourself, you take the man or something. Again, you say it a lot better than I do, but yeah, that was such a soft touch, and it went down like he'd been shot by a sniper from the rafters. So, personally, I think he's got to be dropped. But like I was just about to say, Ten Hag actually come out and said that we want him to stay at Manchester United, and I think good if you do want him for every other team around you, because he's going to be shipping goals for fun. I personally think they should cut their losses and get rid of him.
I think it's one of those. He was phenomenal. He for a long time was the only player who you would look at as a sort of the old-fashioned Manchester United players after Ferguson left. He was the mainstay in the team. He won their Player of the Season. He won the Golden Glove a number of times, and he really did keep their heads above water. I know they've been languishing a bit since Ferguson, and this seems to be the first. They had a half-decent season under Mourinho and one under Van Gaal. But this is the first real season where you've started to see some sort of methodology about how they want to play their football, a style of play, a culture of play. And I think he's got to that point where he did have so many seasons, and you look back at it and you go, but if that's his best, why is he not playing that now? Why can't... and there are a number of factors in that. Some of that's age, some of that's confidence, some of that's having Harry Maguire in front of you for a number of years. I mean, that destroy anyone. But it's just like one of those things that keep him around as a cup goalkeeper, maybe for a bit of influence, bring him through, maybe a little bit of mentoring for some younger ones. I understand that, but I don't see him as a number one that is going to take you anywhere anymore. I think he's past that point now. He's on the decline of his career, and I think what they need to be careful of is that if they do keep him as a number one, that they will go down the route of Hugo Lloris, who is a World Cup winner at Tottenham and was really good. But actually, this season, there's been a number of times that, sorry, pardon me, he shouldn't have been playing. He's awful, and a goalkeeper can make the difference. I mean, you look at this is a nice little segue for me. I thought Leicester City. With Kasper Schmeichel in goal, I know the team has changed a little bit around them. You'd probably argue they've got some more quality players now than they did, or equal quality. I know they had a few gems in there at the time, but they won the Premier League. They were competing for European places. They got rid of Kasper Schmeichel this year. For what reason, I do not know. They did not replace him. They have Iverson, who was already at the club, and it can make some decent saves. He has made some decent saves, but all round he's not as good as a goalkeeper. They're looking like they're going to get relegated this year. So I mean, a goalkeeper can really make the difference. But speaking of Leicester City, it's between really them, Leeds, Nottingham Forest, and Everton at this point. Everton went on to beat Brighton 5-2 today, or 5-1, which was a phenomenal result. But who out of them do you fancy to go down this season with Southampton?
Leicester for definite. I can't see them making any kind of edgeway into stringing a few results together. I know we've got three or four games left of the season, depending on who you're looking at. So the time's running out. There's not a lot of points left to play for. I think we spoke about this just before. There's like a maximum of 12 points. I really can't see Leicester getting out this year. If they do, I think it will be one of the shocks of the season, if I'm being completely honest. When you look at how poorly they've played. Then you've got Nottingham Forest and who else, sorry? Everton.
Leeds.
Leeds.
So Nottingham Forest and Leeds, Leicester are all currently sitting on 30 points. Leicester are sitting just outside the relegation zone, only on goal difference. And they are a good 10 goals better than Leeds. But say they're Nottingham Forest are playing tonight, playing Southampton, so that could all change. If Forest win, they go above Everton, above Leicester, and put Leicester back into the relegation zone.
Yeah, so for me, Leicester and see Leeds is one that I've heard people talking about a lot over the last week. I know obviously Big Sam's come in to steady the ship, hopefully towards the end of the season, and I think it'd be interesting to see what happens at the end of the season, because I think Big Sam's only come in literally for these last four games, so there's not really a lot of time to put your philosophies into the club. But again, we know what miracles Big Sam has worked in the past, so there is every possibility. I'm going to go for Nottingham Forest. So I'm going to go, obviously Southampton, we've already mentioned, is pretty much a foregone conclusion. They are going to go. Then I'm going to go Leicester, and I'm going to go for Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, and so we'll come back to Leeds in just a second. Nottingham Forest, they had a good crack at it. They stuck with Steve Cooper, who took them from relegation fodder in the Championship to obviously a season in the Premier League. The owners chucked money at it, bringing in some previously world-class players and some players of Premier League experience. But they brought in so many players, I think it's been hard to be able to get them to gel.
Yep.
And the one or two players where you do look at Brennan Johnson, Morgan Gibbs-White, who have really sort of been that spark for positivity within their season, have had sort of stop-starts with injuries this season. And had they stayed fit for the whole thing, I think they would have been all right.
Yep.
But they've just not managed to get any real fluidity as what we see in the Championship last season. But you can't blame the owners for trying it. They've chucked money at it. They've gone, if we have a big squad, we've got some some backing, and if we get some key injuries, we've got quality to bring in, but it's just not happened. But Leeds, you mentioned Big Sam there. He is back in the Premier League along with Roy Hodgson. I think what's his name? Neil Warnock's gone back to the Championship. The only manager who's not about at the minute, Harry Redknapp. Could we see a return for Harry Redknapp next season for Portsmouth, guide them back to the dizzy heights of FA Cup champions? But Big Sam, had they brought him in when they brought in Javi Garcia, I think they would have been all right. Bringing him in for 4 games and saying we're the worst informed team in the league, save us. You've got no transfer, you've got no nothing. You've got to walk in with 4 games to go. So essentially, what? And it's not like a normal 4 weeks at the end of the season. It's all bunched up because of the World Cup. So you've got 2 weeks, 3 weeks max to save our club. And they reportedly going to pay him quite handsomely if he does, in signs of a £3 million bonus. But is that almost, if he does that, is that sort of like the return of Jesus? Or I mean, and that he's only been relegated once, hasn't he? And that was with West Brom, I think. And again, he was brought in very late for that, and just couldn't do it. But he's never had this short amount of time to work his ways.
I don't know, with England.
Yeah, but he's the only England man with a 100% win record, Mike.
True. This is very true. But to be honest, I mean, the game against Manchester City, I think, was going to be a massive task.
Yes.
For his first game in charge back in the Premier League. So you can kind of write that one off. So he's then got 3 games in order to change Leeds' fortune for the season. Again, just based on past experience, and a big admirer of Sam Allardyce. Wouldn't want him at my club, but I am a massive admirer of what he does for football teams, and
Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, that's fine. I was just going to say, I do think that the tides will change. I mean, we saw Leeds playing some really nice football against Manchester City. It was just some silly mistakes. I think that Big Sam's going to get them drilled into. I know it is kind of like a short space of time, but I do think he will do enough to keep them up this year. He will go down, I'm not necessarily saying it as a club legend, but he will certainly be fondly remembered by the Leeds fans if he does keep them up for another season. But I would just be interested to see what happens at the end of the season, in which direction they go if they do stay up.
I think if he keeps you up doing that, you have to say to him, will you do a season? Because you're not going to go down with him in charge. You will then build a base to be able to, or solidify a base, I should say, to work from. I mean, when you look at it, as you said, that Manchester City game, first game in, unless you do something a bit like Sean Dyche did, crash bang wallop, change it, go really heavy on the big guys, and go from there. Catch sort of you unaware. It was unlikely to happen. It was a damage limitation game, but I think it's one of those that he will see from that which players on the pitch that should be starting are still in it mentally. Who's willing to fight? Because he will have. I'm sure you'll see some of those players not play again this season, just through the way that they're thinking and playing and training. But they've got 2 home games. One to Newcastle, which is their next game. They then travel to West Ham, which previously, if we hadn't beat Manchester United, would have been a big 6-pointer game. And then they're at home to Tottenham. So 2 home games, which is some advantage. And I think playing Tottenham at the end of the season, where top 4 will be out of their hands, will probably be a blessing in disguise. I know Ryan Mason's got Tottenham playing a little bit better now, but again, I think a lot of those players will be away with a fairy, so to speak, coming to that last game. So there is hope for them. Historically, somewhat of a big club, but yet to return to the dizzying heights of yesteryear. On the other hand of that, Everton. They did have a big result today. They started really well against you guys when Sean Dyche come in, and we were both, I think, fairly confident of them staying up. Um, they've had some dodgy results. They've had a few key injuries. Um, if you give Sean Dyche some time and a little bit of money, as they've backed some of their previous managers, do you see Everton potentially, maybe not next season, but the season after, challenging for European places again with Sean Dyche? Or do you think they're still going to languish down at the bottom end of the table?
I really, really think this depends on how well they back him during the summer. Obviously, providing that they do stay up, I think you will see them not so much backed quite handsomely, but certainly you will see. I think a couple of marquee signings for Everton if they do stay up, and then they go again next year. I do agree with you. I think next year will possibly be kind of mid-table mediocrity.
Yep.
Again, obviously, just knowing how well Sean Dyche runs a team. Obviously, I know towards the back end of his Burnley career, it wasn't great, but
Yep.
I think that's the club, if I'm being completely honest. And obviously, it's taken a Vincent Company to kind of turn around the fortunes of Burnley. Obviously, being promoted back to the Premier League, but do you know what? It wouldn't even surprise me if we see it the following year, kind of mid-table. But I do honestly think you will see some progression certainly under Sean Dyche. So maybe kind of like a 12th, 11th position possibly next year, and then possibly the year after a 9th or 8th. I think it's going to be a good couple of seasons if you were to see that kind of progression into certainly the Europa League.
And so the season after next is when they're also looking to move into that new stadium. I've heard it's already it's a little bit behind schedule, but it's going to be up there. It's a 52,000 seater capacity, potential to go to 62, which puts it right up there with some of the top ones in the country. Challenge from Goodison Park, but you think Goodison Park can be a very difficult place to go when the fans are on side. You almost what's probably double the capacity of what Goodison is. If they bring that same mentality, which I'm sure they probably will do, then that's going to be again a really hard place to potentially play. The next team I did want to speak to you about was Chelsea. Now, Frank Lampard got his first win of the season. So not the first win of the season. He was previously at Everton. But he got his first win as Chelsea boss against Bournemouth. You started to see that quality come through again, the simple balls being played. They've got quality players. They've just not been able to find a finish. And that was the same under Graham Potter. They've come in under Frank Lampard, who's tried to be maybe a little bit more direct, and it's not worked out to start off with. Do you think they'll go on a little bit of run to end the season?
See, I'm not sure if yesterday was the weekend was a fluke, because obviously I know they started the game well, went 1-0 up, but then they were very quickly pegged back by Bournemouth. And from listening to the commentaries, it sounded like Bournemouth were the better team to start off with anyway. Again, I suppose it's just one of those situations where you do have to get the rub of the green, so to speak. And I think the difficulty with Chelsea is that at the point where they do get a result, you think, oh, okay, this is going to be the point at which Chelsea start to kick on. But it hasn't happened this year. And to be honest, it really wouldn't surprise me if it still doesn't happen. I don't know whether we'll see another win for the season, maybe a couple of draws, but yeah, I don't think you will see a prolific scoring feat from Chelsea or a prolific points return over the last remaining games of the season. I think it's going to be fairly bang average, if I'm being completely honest.
They've got one winnable fixture in it, and that's their next game at home to Nottingham Forest. They then travel to Man City. travel to Man United, and then they host Newcastle, which is a horrible run in. And when you look at um, the run they've had since he's been in charge, I think in some senses it's been a little bit hard done by. I think if Graham Potter was in charge, it would have been the same results. The two games against Real Madrid were really difficult to win anyway. I think they're going to win the Champions League. They've then played yourselves, who are challenging for the title, Brighton, who are high flying this year, apart from obviously the most recent result, Brentford, again having a solid season. So it's one of those. At Bournemouth was that first game you go, well, actually, you should be getting points out of that. I know you're in bad form, but you should have the quality to beat them. So it's one of those. I know Frank probably wanted to come back at a bit of unfinished business, as we discussed, having been sacked previously. But do you think he will be disappointed in the way it's gone, or do you think he will go, well, that's sort of par for the course? A team that's not in form is a new challenge. It's still a high profile job, the expectation, but actually I've kept them up. I've come back and I've done my bit, and now I'm going to walk away.
Again, I think if it's one of these ones where we'd been saying for ages, if you go back to our earlier podcasts in the season, kind of around about or just after Christmas, I think we were even talking about it then, about the possibility of Graham Potter going. But obviously the decision was made only a couple of weeks ago to sack him off and bring Frank Lampard back. But I think he would have preferred a longer time at the helm of Chelsea. Again, it's one of these ones where you've got kind of like a short space or a short turnaround in order to kind of stamp your philosophy. And there may be even a point of I can't, or there's no guarantees for me at the end of this year that I'm going to be getting the job permanently, when we look at some of the reports that are coming out as well saying this person is likely to be appointed at the end of the season anyway. So do you go in with kind of like a bit of a half-assed attitude to management? I would doubt it from his side of things, because of obviously the club links and all this sort of stuff and potential job opportunities in the future. But I think it was the wrong time to bring him in. I know that the idea was to kind of lift morale at the club a little bit. But even listening to some of the fans, listening to the appointment, I think it goes back to that certain, is it always a good idea to go back in time? I mean, certainly if they do get some points over the next few games, it can't do his reputation any disservice by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it will be a good interview, so to speak, for any possible suitors coming up from the Championship that want new management, or certainly for any clubs that are remaining in the in the Premier League, that could be an opportunity. For me personally, I think he should have stuck in the Championship for a little bit longer, and ridden out, or got some experience at that level first, and then made his way into the Premiership. But again, I suppose if it's the same thing that we saw with Graham Potter, if Chelsea come knocking, it's not one of these ones that you turn down, is it?
No, it's not. And do you think maybe he should have lent on the shoulder of Uncle Harry, and brought him with him as a coach or an assistant manager this time round? It's only for a few games. He's going to bring you some tricks of the trade to get things going a bit quicker. Because he's been around the block a few times. Do you think maybe that would have been useful, or do you think he wants to try and step out of the shadow of, well, you're Harry Redknapp's nephew and you'll never be as good as he is?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, it would have, I suppose, been a bit of a fairy tale story. But I think if that did happen, I think it's the latter point that you were making, because is it then Frank Lampard keeping him up, or is it Harry Redknapp that's keeping him up? Do you know what I mean? So I get what you're saying from the terms of the experience that Harry Redknapp would bring to the dressing room. Is obviously a massive character, loved by whoever's played under him. But I think he wants to kind of make a name for himself and do it for himself. I mean, there was even talks about Harry Redknapp even coming back into Spurs for the remainder of the season. And I listened to him on TalkSport, and he said, "Oh yeah, I've been waiting by my phone. It's just not rung." And he said he would be interested to go back into it. And to be honest, I don't think it's a bad shout for next season. But I know with the I say this very loosely, the ambitions of Daniel Levy and Tottenham. I just don't see. I see them trying to go for one of these high-profile manager signings, but again, when you look at the experience that has been in that over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, your Jose Mourinho's, your Antonio Conte's, I think that's going to be a big off-put for any potential big hitter manager signings over the course of the next 2 years, because they're not getting backed. They're not getting backed appropriately. And then obviously Harry Kane might be off in the summer as well. So if you take out Harry Kane's goals from Tottenham, you're possibly looking bottom half of the table for Tottenham next year, obviously depending if he goes or not.
Yeah, we'll say the season before, if you took Harry Kane's goals out of Tottenham, they would have been in the relegation places. But let's move on to another team in London, Arsenal. I had a bit of a torrid time against Manchester City a week or so ago. You come back, you beat Chelsea quite convincingly. Martin Odegaard pulling the strings again. You then come against a very informed, well-run Newcastle. You brush them aside, all with a young defender. I don't know if he's young. Jacob Kouar. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Yeah, there you go. I see him. I was in hospital. I was watching the game against Chelsea, and he played that game as well, didn't he? And I thought, it's not a player that I've never heard of, so I assume he's come through your youth ranks.
Nope.
No?
January signing. So he come from, I want to say Sporting, or he was a January signing for us this year.
But okay, yeah, I'm wrong. But I did think, for someone who's not played before that I know of in the Premier League, has done very well. Did the simple things very well, which is win the ball back and recycle it quickly. There was no mucking about with it. And I think it just maybe has brought a little bit of steadiness just at the right time. I mean, I know we're talking about Rob Holding being one of those guys you want in the dressing room, not necessarily on the pitch. So just to fill that gap where there has been a few silly errors while William Saliba's out, do you think that he will possibly challenge Gabriel Jesus, just Gabriel, for a starting spot in the team next year alongside William Saliba? Or do you think he's still going to be that sort of second fiddle backup emergency player?
I do think he's going to be one of these second fiddle players. I mean, don't get me wrong, for the last 2 games that he's played, I think he's been absolutely brilliant. He's, as you said, he's done the simple things correctly, and it's nice to have options, because obviously, I'm sorry that I'm just kind of repeating everything that you've just said. Obviously, Rob Holding, he has got that experience. He's been in the team, I think, one of the longest serving players. Possibly Mohamed El Neni, maybe slightly longer, but yeah, I think he's definitely, I want to say, kind of like Route 1 defending. He has done the simple stuff right, and I think he's had a couple of shaky moments. I mean, he's played a couple of times in the Europa League for us, possibly one of the League Cups,
Right, okay,
but not massively featured since he signed for us. I suppose there's not really been any need to, when you've looked at the partnership of Gabriel and William Saliba. So for the remainder of the season, obviously until Saliba's back from injury, I think, from what I've seen over the last couple of weeks, I think I would prefer him and Gabriel at the back instead of Holding. Again, nothing against Holding. I think it was just, I think Rob Holding can be a little bit hot-headed sometimes, maybe caught out of position a couple of times, and dare I say it, he's been turned quite easily on a couple of occasions. Again, the Man City game, I think, was evidence of that. In terms of next year, I mean, he's certainly, providing that Saliba and Gabriel maintain their fitness next year, I think he's again going to be a cup player. Not necessarily Champions League, maybe early stages of the Champions League. Obviously, depending on who we get in the group stages, and possibly some of the lower down teams within the league, you could see him playing him. But I don't think he's going to be displacing anyone out of position in terms of Saliba or Gabriel.
And say, in terms of you saying about displacing players, there has been rumours that you're going to give Arteta a £150 million war chest to go into the summer transfers with. Now, £150 million a year, 10 years ago, you would have been going, "Well, we're gonna pick up the world's best players here." That's probably going to get you one or two players. And with that said, there's been a few links with people leaving. The likes of Balogun, I think that's how you pronounce it. Eddie, Balogun, Reece Nelson. More recently, Thomas Partey may be going out the door. Kieran Tierney, both have been displaced by, say, Zinchenko and Jorginho, respectively. You've been heavily linked with Declan Rice. Do you think that maybe spending too much and replacing too many players too quickly could have a negative effect rather than positive? Or do you think Arteta's now spot on with who he wants, who he's got, and will push him and just add to that in the right way?
Right, so just to reflect on a couple of names you mentioned there, obviously Kieran Tierney. I will personally be gutted if he goes. I think he's been outstanding for us when he's fit. The only thing I can see that is going to cause an issue, because as long as Zinchenko's fit, I think he's going to be primary defender number one in the left back position. I think Kieran Tierney's been quite unfortunate with the number of injuries he's had since he signed for us. I think he's been with us for 2.5, 3 years now, which is such a shame, because I think he is, again, a no-nonsense defender. I would say possibly out of the two, he's the better defender, but I think Zinchenko's better getting forwards, playing that kind of wing-back position. Thomas Partey's another one, certainly in recent weeks, that has made me raise my eyebrows a little bit. I think for the majority of the first half of the season, he's been absolutely fantastic. And when he was missing, we noticed it. But I think over the last couple of weeks, certainly in the Southampton game, the Liverpool game, and the game against yourselves, he's been poor. I think the decision to bring in Jorginho, I've got to say, was a bit of a masterclass from Arteta, given his experience. And I think I may be one of a few people who was actually excited about the prospect of him coming into the team, because he's got that experience. I think with his age, he's, I think, just turned 30, or just the wrong side of 30. But he's on a 1.5-year contract, so we've got him for at least next season anyway. And I think there's an option to extend his contract after that. But I think certainly in the game against Newcastle, he was absolutely phenomenal. Game against Chelsea, was that an occasion for him that he could have crumbled, obviously going back to a team where he was, certainly in his earlier career, was much adored by the Chelsea fans. Again, another solid performance from him. So if the rumours are true that we are in for Declan Rice, and apparently, again, just some rumours that I have heard, is that the deal's already been done, we're just waiting till the end of the season, then we can sign contracts. Providing that we have Granit Xhaka, Jorginho, and Declan Rice, I would be happy with those positions. One person that I think possibly will need to go out on loan next year is Fabio Vieira. He has
Yep.
moments of brilliance, but against Manchester City, he was absolutely bullied. 100%. I don't think it's the right time for him within the squad. But again, we saw that with Martinelli. We saw that with Saka in the early stages of their Arsenal career. So he's definitely one for the future, I think. And I don't think a loan
Just
spell.
a few more games consistently to get up to speed with what's the intensity of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Balogun, again, there's that one hasn't been a secret. Obviously, he, I think it was last year and this year has been kind of knocking on the door, I think, for a starting position. And I think it was last year when we extended Eddie Nketiah's contract. I think that would have been the time for him, because when he's played for us again in the Europa League and in the League Cup games, he scores goals and he's obviously been absolutely prolific. I can't even remember where it might actually be at Middlesbrough. This year. So, and he's again an absolutely phenomenal. No, that's a lie. He's not in Middlesbrough at all. I think he's overseas. But wherever he is, he's banging in goals for fun this year. So I think his time at Arsenal is drawing to an end. It's a shame. I would love to have seen him in the first team. And I think he would have been a lot more prolific than Eddie Nketiah is. Again, not a dig at Eddie Nketiah. I thought he did brilliant for the time, or certainly for the first stage of Gabriel Jesus being out, because he was scoring goals. There's certainly some names that I wouldn't be disappointed to see leave the club, apart from Kieran Tierney, obviously. But I do still think that we need to make 2 or 3 signings. In fact, possibly 4 signings over the course of the summer. And I mean, you look at some of the bargains that we've got over the last couple of years. There have been these hidden gems. Tommy Asu, I think, is brilliant, but he's another one that's had too many injuries this season. So I think 4 positions going into the summer transfer window, clear some of the, I want to say, deadwood off the books. I don't mean that they are deadwood, but second stringers, perfect. And I think we can challenge again next year.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Speaking of, say, Declan Rice player potentially going in, he currently plays for West Ham, which is where we're going next. We mentioned the decent result against Manchester United. Manchester United were the better team, let's be honest. Saeed Benrahma did score a goal. He had a pot shot while someone was down. I don't know if it caught De Gea out a little bit, that he wasn't expecting it. It bobbled around a little bit, and he dived and just went for it. It wasn't a strong hand at all. Should have been a save. But Manchester United I think hit the post 3 times. They had a number of goals which Fabianski was well beaten by. Didn't even bother diving, and were just wide. So it's a win's a win. It gives you confidence going into a game in the Europa Conference League against AZ Alkmaar. We should walk into the final, really, which would be good for us. But I'm more concerned about the second leg of that. We'll get into that in just a minute. The one point I want to bring up from this game was the Lindelof handball. So we essentially, Cross has come in. His hand was in a position where I would have said it was natural. He then pulled it back to block it. And if that's not an intentional handball, I don't know what is. But Paddy Power summed it up brilliantly. If you haven't already, go over and look at my Twitter, because I did retweet it. Well, I posted it because it was over on Facebook. But it was essentially saying an expert or a clip from the VAR where they had joked that the VAR had looked at it and said, it's okay though, we've checked the club badge, it says Manchester United, so no penalty, play on. which is sort of par for the course. It's what everyone's thinking, and now the big companies are calling it out. Will it be addressed? I don't know. But we won the game, and yeah, do you think that was a handball, or do you think it was fair that it wasn't given?
So two things. I
One,
think popcorn and kettle black with some of your handballs this season.
on all of those occasions said they should have been penalties.
Yeah, no.
I said they should have been.
You have been very good with those decisions. Without a shadow of a doubt, handball. 100%. Again, listening to the commentary, I think there was four pundits talking about it at that particular point. All of them have said it should have been a penalty, and likewise, you'll come on to it in a second, so I won't kind of like steal your thunder. But yeah, I don't understand. I would love to hear. Ref Watch has got to come out at some point this week, and that has to be a topic that is discussed. And I would love to hear the absolute bullshit that they come out with to kind of justify as to why that wasn't given. Yeah, again, that this outside of the silhouette fucking. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna go on a bit of a rant again. Yeah, that the whole outside of the silhouette business is getting on my nerves. If it hits your arm, regardless of proximity, let's make it more fun next season. Let's just give it as a handball, and we'll start to see balls flying in left, right, and centre at 2 yards and hitting people's hands. But at least we'll see more goals next year.
Yeah, indeed we will. Indeed we will. So yeah, I think we're gonna walk to the final of the Europa Conference League. Now, just quickly, Leicester are currently in the bottom three again. Nottingham Forest 3-1 up against Southampton in the first half. Sounds like a really interesting game. So go and watch highlights, I'm sure, at some point after you've seen this, because it won't be live no more. But yeah, my concern about the Europa Conference League is we should win it. We're at home for the first game, and we've been very good at home. My concern is we go and do a job, we win 2-0, and then we go, right, job done. We play Brentford, bit shaky, maybe get a draw out of that. And then we go and play in the away leg and thinking it's all done. And we put in a poor performance and we lose there. Do you think let's phrase it this way. Do you think it's a successful season now we're pretty much safe from relegation if we win the Europa Conference League? Or do you think it's still one to put down as a question mark?
Well, this is a topic of conversation that again I've heard this week in terms of Manchester United. So successful season, you can't argue with the fact if you walk away with a trophy, it's a successful season. Is it a good season? I would say is what you need to be asking. So successful on paper, yes, you've got silverware. You're guaranteed Europa League football next year. Successful, yes. Good season, no. When you look at how you've played for the last 2 seasons, obviously you were battling for top 4 at one point.
Last year.
Yeah. And the year before, because obviously you got into the semi-finals of the Europa League and that. So, yeah, you can't argue with how well you played over the last couple of seasons. So by comparison, you have to say it's a bad season looking at where you are scraping, theoretically, touch wood, the relegation fight. Obviously we know there is, until it's mathematically impossible, it could still happen. So yeah, it's a bad season, absolutely. Successful season, yes.
Fair enough. Speaking of successful seasons, you've had a pretty successful season predicting things. Each week we do predict some games. This week we're looking to next season almost. We've got a couple of Premier League games coming up with West Ham and Arsenal, but we also have some Championship playoff games. I know Burnley are already into the Premier League next year, coming up as champions. And you sent me a thing earlier to say Vincent Company has signed a new 5-year deal, so they are invested in him because there are rumours of Tottenham trying to take him away. So he's got a big job to do there, a hard job to do. But he's taken them back up, and I think they'll probably stick with him, even if they're fighting relegation. But Mike, what games are we predicting this week?
Okay, so we've got 4 games to predict this week. Obviously, you mentioned Brentford versus West Ham and Arsenal are at home to Brighton, both on Sunday. But looking at the Championship concluded this afternoon, and it looks as if Sunderland, Luton, Coventry and Middlesbrough are now going to be fighting it out for that coveted playoff championship within the Championship. And so we have 2 games, Sunderland versus Luton and then Coventry versus Middlesbrough. I made my predictions as to who I think is going to be one of the 2 coming up, but obviously we'll predict these first 2 games to start off with. So we'll start off with the Premier League, Brentford versus West Ham, and so we'll do these predictions and then we'll just do a quick recap of last week's results as well.
So can keep it simple this week. I think this is the back burner of the games that we have over the next week and a half, 2 weeks. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Short and sweet.
Okay. For me, looking at the form of the 2 clubs, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago when we played West Ham, there's definitely been an upturn in your performances. I know there was a bit of an unexpected result against Crystal Palace, but again, you are scoring goals at the moment. I'm actually going to go for a 2-2 draw on this one.
Fair enough. Points all round.
Absolutely. And then we later on in the day, Arsenal are at home to Brighton. Obviously, Brighton have had, I think, a fantastic season in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, considering they lost Graham Potter, and I think they have been absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah,
certainly punching above their weight this year. I've got some fantastic players. They've got rid of some of the deadwood as well. I hope, obviously, we continue to keep the pressure on to Manchester City. So I am going to go for 3-1 to Arsenal on this one. Certainly, after the performance against Newcastle yesterday, there was a lot of fire in the bellies. And it was an absolutely outstanding performance. So, I'm going to go for 3-1 to Arsenal on that one.
I mean, today Brighton didn't have their normal goalkeeper today. Robert Sanchez was out, and Jason Steele was in. If I don't know why he wasn't playing. I don't know if it's just fixture congestion, whether he's ill, whether he's got an injury. I think if he's injured, that's really going to hinder Brighton going forward. That and the fact they've got a lot of games to play towards the end of the season. I'm one to incline or to agree with you that they're gonna lose. I think Arsenal are going to win, but I'm going to go with a bit more of a tit for tat game. I'm going to go 4-3 to Arsenal. I think Danny Welbeck may come and get a couple of goals against you.
It wouldn't surprise me as well. And I hope he celebrates as well, because, I mean, there was no bad feeling when he left the club. I think he'd be welcomed back by our fans as well. But yeah, Brighton certainly done absolutely fantastic this season. So moving very quickly onto the Championship playoffs. First game, Sunderland versus Luton.
Yep.
I'll let you go on this one.
No, I was going to say the only celebration that would be welcomed by everyone from Danny Welbeck was that Adebayor sprint up the pitch.
Yeah.
And that brilliant. It'd be the farthest and the fastest that Welbeck's run in years, but it's fine. Luton are almost back. You could say that for all those teams. They've all played in the top flight before. Luton were in the Premier League. I think the inaugural season. They certainly was in the first division before that. They had some financial strife. Ended up down in the Conference League for a long time. They've slowly worked their way back. Loyal fans they do have there, although there's not many of them because it's only little ground. I'm going to go Are they home or away?
Sunderland at home on the first leg.
Sunderland at home. So if Sunderland are at home, that's also a difficult place to go. Long travel. I'm gonna go for a 2-1 game to Luton. Oh no, I'm not. 1-1. 1-1. I think Sunderland will put on a merry fight, although they've not been as good in the league this year. But I think that the Stadium of Light, when it's rocking, it is really rocking. I don't know if even it's called the Stadium of Light anymore. But I think that will be enough to get a point. I think they'll probably lose it on the return leg, but 1-1 for me.
Okay, to be honest, I was actually going to go with the same scoreline. I know Luton have done impressively well this season, but I've got to be honest, I do have a bit of a soft spot for Sunderland. I've been up there a couple of times. Best friends' families are from that area. Been to the last game of the season at the Stadium of Light when Roy Keane was in charge, and it was one of the memories that will definitely live with me till I die. It was a fantastic atmosphere. Fucking long day though. I actually think there's going to be a bit of an upset on this one. I think Luton will ultimately progress to the final of the knockouts. Knockouts, the playoffs. But I think Sunderland will win at the home leg. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Sunderland on this one.
Fair enough.
And then
that was Coventry versus Middlesbrough.
Yeah, to be honest, again, I know you've obviously spoken very highly of Michael Carrick at Middlesbrough already in the podcast. Again, I think from looking at some of the results that Middlesbrough have had this season, I think this is going to be a fairly comfortable game for Middlesbrough. I'm going to go for a 2-0 win to Middlesbrough on this one.
Oh, that's slightly opposite to what I was going to say. I was inclined to agree with you. I have an ulterior motive for wanting them to lose, and that is I think if they get promoted, they're going to keep Michael Carrick. I want him at West Ham. So there is that ulterior motive there. But the last couple of games, they've not been at the height of what they can produce. They've a couple of draws and a loss, I think. And Coventry maybe, I think, had the same couple of draws and a win. I think, again, the home advantage is going to come into it. I'm going to go for a very close game, but 2-1 to Coventry.
Okay.
Well, so what I would suggest to you as viewers, listeners, just general people, get involved. Let us know what you think those results are going to be. See if you can beat us on our predictions. I think we're going to have a quick recap of the points and what we predicted last week, some of which was outlandish, and Haaland didn't score 15 goals against West Ham, so I probably didn't get many points. But Mike, over to you.
Yeah, so looking at the games that we predicted, so it's a 2-game week this week. So Arsenal versus Chelsea, Man City, West Ham, Newcastle, Arsenal, and West Ham versus Manchester United. You predicted 2-1 to Chelsea. I mentioned last week it was written in the stars. Chelsea hadn't won for ages and could potentially cause an upset. But it wasn't meant to be. So it's, you predicted 2-1. I predicted 3-1. The score was 3-1. Stupid goal that we conceded. So that's 0 points to you, 3 points to me. Manchester City, West Ham. You predicted 7-0 to Manchester City. I predicted 4-1. Score was 3-0. So it's a point each. Newcastle versus Arsenal. You predicted 0-0. I predicted 3-2. Score was 2-0 to Arsenal. So again, 0 points to you, 1 point to me. And the last game, West Ham Man United. You predicted a 3-1 win to Manchester United. I went for a 3-3 draw. The score was 1-0 to West Ham. So 0 points to each of us. So the points for this week, 1 point to you, 5 to me. So that takes the season totals. Ian, you are currently on 48 points, and I have romped into the lead further and currently sitting on 64 points. So it looks like it's coming home. It's coming home. But again,
I almost a clean sweep for the next couple of weeks to retain.
Exactly. And we've predicted 4 games this week already, so it's not impossible.
I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but that's sort of what I did last year to win it. I don't think I won it by much last year, but it was right at the last gasp as well. Um, have you got any more footballing news this week, Mike?
No, nothing from me.
No, neither from me. So in that case, as we said at the beginning, I've been Ian.
I've been Mike.
Thank you for tuning in to the FDT TV podcast. I'm glad that was at the end of it rather than at the beginning. And we will see you next week. Take care.
Thanks very much.